Hello everyone. This is a video for a close reading analysis of August heat. And so we will go through the story and do a guided reading to help you with your TDA assignment. So as we read, I want you to think about whose point of view is the story being told from? How do the author's tone and word choices affect how we perceive the events in the story? And how might the story be different if told from a different perspective? So as we read, I want you to think about those three questions. So here we have Phineas Stone Road, Clapham, August 20th, 1900. I have had what I believe to be the most remarkable day in my life, and while the events are still fresh in my mind, I wish to put them down on paper as clearly as possible. Now we're going to come back to that beginning of this story and talk about that. Let me say at the outset that my name is James Clarence Withencroft. I am 40 years old, in perfect health, never having known a day's illness. By profession, I am an artist, not a very successful one, but I earn enough money by my black and white work to satisfy my necessary wants. My only near relative, a sister, died 5 years ago, so that I am independent. I breakfast this morning at 9, and after glancing through the morning paper, I lighted my pipe and proceeded to let my mind wander in the hope that I might chance upon some subject for my pencil. The room, though door and windows were open, was oppressively hot, and I had just made up my mind that the coolest and most comfortable place in the neighborhood would be the deep end of the public swimming bath when the idea came. I began to draw. So intent was I on my work that I left my lunch untouched, only stopping work when the clock of St. Jude's struck 4. So what do we learn in the beginning of the story? What do we learn in the beginning of the story? Well, we get the setting, right? The location, the date, and we get the weather and temperature, right? Oppressively hot. We also get information about the main character. We get his name, his age, his physical nature, his profession. He's an artist. We also get some family information here as well. He is all alone. He's all by himself. He doesn't have any living relatives left. And then we get information about what he's doing that morning. All right, the final result for a hurried sketch was, I felt sure, the best thing I had done. It showed a criminal in the dock immediately after the judge had pronounced sentence. The man was fat, enormously fat. The flesh hung in rolls about his chin. It creased his huge, stumpy neck. He was clean-shaven, perhaps I should say a few days before he must have been clean-shaven, and almost bald. He stood in the dock, his short, clumsy fingers clasping the rail, looking straight in front of him. The feeling that his expression conveyed was not so much one of horror as of utter, absolute collapse. So he starts talking about what he drew. And he's describing this man in his drawing. This man is a criminal. He is in a courtroom, and this judge has just given him the sentence. He describes what this man looks like and kind of what he's doing and how he's feeling. So he says, I rolled up the sketch, and without quite knowing why, I placed it in my pocket. So he takes the drawing and he puts it in his pocket. He doesn't know why, he just does that. Then he leaves the house. So he goes out. He starts talking about how he kind of starts walking in a general direction. From there onwards, I have only the vaguest recollection of where I went. So he's not sure exactly where he's going or where he went. He just kind of was walking with no destination in mind, and he's wandering around aimlessly. The one thing of which I was fully conscious was the awful heat that came up from the dusty asphalt pavement as an almost palpable wave. I longed for the thunder promised by the great banks of copper-colored cloud that hung low over the western sky. So what is the conflict here? What is the conflict? Person versus what? Well, the only real problem in the story so far is the heat, right? That awful heat. And so, because it is the weather, this is person versus nature, right? So the heat is the conflict. That is the only, really the main problem here, is that that heat from the weather is causing a problem, right? And so we have person versus nature is our conflict. Person versus nature. He describes the heat as palpable. Palpable means you can touch it. You can feel it. Physically feel it. So this heat is so thick and heavy that he can almost reach out and grab it. Okay. I must have walked 5 or 6 miles when a small boy roused me from my reverie by asking the time. It was 20 minutes to 7. So he's kind of daydreaming here, and this boy asks for the time and kind of wakes him up from his daydream. Excuse me. When he left me, I began to take stock of my bearings. So he wakes up from his daydream, and he is just kind of trying to figure out where he is. I found myself standing before a gate that led into a yard bordered by a strip of thirsty earth, where there were flowers, purple stock and scarlet geranium. Above the entrance was a board with the inscription, Chas Atkinson, monumental mason, worker in English and Italian marbles. So here, he comes to this place, and he ends up at this gate. And there's a sign there. Chas is a nickname for Charles. So we have Charles Atkinson is the name. Monumental mason. He's a stonemason that works in on monuments, meaning gravestones. And he works in different types of marbles, which is a type of stone. From the yard itself came a cheery whistle, a noise of hammer blows, and the cold sound of steel meeting stone. So he hears someone in there working. A sudden impulse made me enter. So he doesn't know why he goes in, but he has this kind of urge to enter. A man was sitting with his back towards me, busy at work on a slab of curiously veined marble. He turned around as he heard my steps, and I stopped short. It was the man I had been drawing, whose portrait lay in my pocket. So, Chas Atkinson, Charles Atkinson, is this stonemason who's working. Withencroft goes in. The man turns around. He sees him, and automatically recognizes him as the man in his drawing. So this man that is standing in front of him now is the same person that he drew that morning. The drawing is in his pocket. He sat there, huge and elephantine. Remember, this man is a big man. He's obese. The sweat pouring from his scalp, which he wiped with a red silk handkerchief. But though the face was the same, the expression was absolutely different. So again, that heat is being mentioned there as a problem for everyone. He greeted me smiling as if we were old friends and shook my hand. I apologized for my intrusion. They start talking about the weather, right? That heat is a problem for everyone. He pointed to the end of the gravestone on which he was at work, and I sat down. That's a beautiful piece of stone you've got hold of, I said. He shook his head. So he starts talking about how this piece of marble, this stone that he's working on, has some issues, and it's got some cracks in it. Then what is it for? I asked. The man burst out laughing. So here he talks about how he's not using this piece for an actual headstone. He is using it as kind of like an example for his workmanship. So he can show people the kind of like what a finished product would look like. He went on to talk of marbles. Okay. At the end of every other minute, he would drop his tools, wipe his shining head, and curse the heat. There's that conflict again, right? That heat is becoming a problem. A big problem. It's continuing to be a big problem for everyone in the story. I said little, for I felt uneasy. There was something unnatural, uncanny, in meeting this man. I tried at first to persuade myself that I had seen him before, that his face, unknown to me, had found a place in some out-of-the-way corner of my memory, but I knew that I was practicing little more than a plausible piece of deception. So here he knows that he has never met this man before. He is certain for a fact that he has never seen this person before. But he's trying to kind of convince himself that I must have met him before. I must have seen this man somewhere before for me to draw a picture of him. Mr. Atkinson finished his work, spat on the ground, and got up with a sigh of relief. There, what do you think of that? He said, with an air of event pride. The inscription, which I read for the first time, was this: Sacred to the memory of James Clarence Withencroft, born January 18th, 1860. He passed away very suddenly on August 20th, 1900. In the midst of life, we are in death. Now, let's go back to the beginning of the story. Remember, we get all the information from the main character, his name, his age, and we also get the setting, the location, the date. So, our narrator's name is James Clarence Withencroft. He's 40 years old. The date of the story, today's date in the story, is August 20th, 1900. On this gravestone, Atkinson has chiseled James Clarence Withencroft, born 40 years ago, from the today's date, August 20th, 1900. Now, for some time I sat in silence. Then a cold shudder ran down my spine. I asked him where he had seen the name. "Oh, I didn't see it anywhere," replied Mr. Atkinson. "I wanted some name, and I put down the first that came into my head. Why do you want to know?" "It's a strange coincidence, but it happens to be mine." So the narrator's name is James Clarence Withencroft. This is his birthday, and his death date, the day of his death, is today's date, the day of the story. He gave a long, low whistle. And the dates? I can only answer for one of them, and that's correct. So he's, of course, talking about his birthday. Yes, that's my name. That's my birthday. I don't know about the death date. I don't know when, the day that I'm going to die. That I hope that's not today. Right? "It's a rum go," he said. A rum go is a surprising occurrence. It's a surprising occurrence. But he knew less than I did. I told him of my morning's work. I took the sketch from my pocket and showed it to him. As he looked, the expression of his face altered until it became more and more like that of the man I had drawn. "And it was only the day before yesterday," he said, "that I told Maria there was no such thing as ghosts. Neither of us had seen a ghost, but I knew what he meant." So not only is the one man chiseling into a gravestone the other man's name, birth date, and today's date as a date of death, but Withencroft is showing Atkinson the picture that he drew of him just that morning. And neither one of these men have met each other before. Complete strangers. So they're trying to figure this out. "You probably heard my name," I said, "and you must have seen me somewhere and have forgotten it. Were you here, so-and-so, or there?" "Nope, never been there in my life." We were silent for some time. We were both looking at the same thing, the two dates on the gravestone, and one, his birthday, was right. "So come inside and have some supper," said Mr. Atkinson. So they go into the house, they have dinner, they eat dinner together. The wife is showing him a Dore Bible, a Bible illustrated by this person, Dore. They start talking about their lives and kind of just chit-chatting. They start talking again about the hot weather and the heat, right, being a problem. "Where do you live?" I told him my address. It would take an hour's quick walk to get back home. So it's like this, he said. "Well, look at the matter straight. If you go back home tonight, you take your chance of accidents." So they start talking about, you really shouldn't walk home tonight because you could get into trouble. Some different accidents could happen where you could get hurt or you could get killed and you could die on your way home. So why don't you stay here? You'll be safer. The best thing we can do," he continued, "is for you to stay here till 12 o'clock. We'll go upstairs and smoke. It may be cooler inside." To my surprise, I agreed. And here we have the ending of the story. We are sitting now in a long, low room beneath the eaves. Atkinson has sent his wife to bed. He himself is busy sharpening some tools at a little oil stone, smoking one of my cigars the while. The air seems charged with thunder. I am writing this at a sharky table before the open window. Now, I am writing this. We are sitting now in a room, and I am writing this now. He is writing this now. So this is If we go back to the beginning of the story, he writes, I have had what I believe to be the most remarkable day in my life. He's talking about today in the story, this day. And while the events are still fresh in my mind, they just happened, I wish to put them down on paper as clearly as possible. So at the end of the story, the narrator is writing down, the narrator is writing down the events of the day. He is writing what has happened. And so at the beginning of the story, when we read that he's writing these events down, this is what he has written at the end of the story. We'll come back to that again and kind of talk about that a little bit more. So to continue, I'm writing this as a shaky table before the open window. The leg is cracked, and Atkinson, who seems a handyman with his tools, is going to mend it as soon as he has finished putting an edge on his chisel. It is after 11 now. I shall be gone in less than an hour. Now, we have Withencroft writing at the desk. We have Atkinson sharpening his chisel, sharpening this tool. It's after 11, so it's almost 12 o'clock, midnight, on the day that supposedly Withencroft is supposed to die or be dead. He says, I shall be gone in less than an hour. Now, is that foreshadowing? Is that foreshadowing? I shall be gone in less than an hour? The gone could be he's going to be leaving the house and going home in less than an hour. Or it could be I shall be dead in less than an hour. I shall be dead soon. So that could go either way, right? We have, but the heat is stifling. The heat is stifling. Stifling means it's so thick and heavy that it's like you can't breathe. It's suffocating. And the last line from the story, it is enough to send a man mad. It's enough to send a man mad. Now remember, in this context, the word mad doesn't mean angry. It means crazy or insane. So the heat is stifling. It's enough to send a man mad. Not angry, but the heat is so bad that it's enough to make a person crazy or insane, or make them do crazy or insane things. Now, this is a cliffhanger, right? The story is a cliffhanger. It ends there. We're never given a resolution to the story. It ends with the reader wondering what is going to happen next. Now it is implied that maybe Atkinson kills Withencroft, right? So it's possible that Withencroft is murdered by Atkinson, right? We can make that inference. We can infer that that happens, but it's never actually told or given in the story, right? Now, remember, he's writing this story that we are reading, he's writing this story at the end of the story, right? He's writing it, and we're reading this. Now, are we reading this because he survived and he lived through that day and he's alive and he was able to share his story with others? Or are we reading this because he has died and he was killed by Atkinson? Withencroft was murdered, and we are reading this story after the fact, after he dies. We don't know. It's up to your interpretation. We could go either way, right? Now, think about how might the story be different if told from a different perspective. In this perspective, Atkinson is the murderer, and Withencroft is the person being killed, right? But is it possible that the heat made Atkinson crazy and made him do insane things like murder people, murder someone, right? Or is Withencroft the one that goes crazy? Is Withencroft the one that the heat made insane? And maybe he imagined the whole thing. Or maybe the heat made him have hallucinations. And none of this is actually real or happening. Think about that. All right, so that is the end of our guided reading for the story, August Heat. Hope that helped with the TDA assignment.